Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I need to feel that rahmah. Alhamdulillahi wa kafa. Salamun ala ibadihi allazina istafa amma ba'd. Fa'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. ولا تقف ما ليس لك به علم إن السمع والبصر والفؤاد كل أولئك كان عنه مسؤولا سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. Arsalan ended with the last suggestion was Asmaul Husna. So one of the things that you need to understand before you navigate through this noise of life and get to your destination is that Hadi is Allah Rabbul Izzat. और वो हादी ने अपना तारुफ कुरान में कराया कैसे? रहमान और रहीम के तौर पर. Couldn't have been better. He says I'm Rabbul Alameen, वो ज़ात जो हम सबको पालने वाली है. So if you really understand that Allah Rabbul Izzat हादी हैं, तो ये हो नहीं सकता कि वो हादी मुझे हदायत ना दे. That's the first thing that you need to understand कि हमें हदायत मिलने की वाहिद सोर्स वो अल्लाह रब्बुल इज़्ज़त है. एंड उस सोर्स को हम तक पहुंचने का जो जरिया है वो दैट इज कुरान एंड सुन्ना. तो अल्लाह रब्बुल इज़्ज़त कुरान में क्या कह रहे हैं कि वला तक़फ़ु मा लैसा लक बिही इल्म, कि यू शुड नॉट फॉलो अ पाथ दैट यू डू नॉट हैव इल्म ऑफ. और उसके बाद अल्लाह रब्बुल इज़्ज़त किसकी बात कर रहे हैं? तीन चीज़ों की. समाअत की, व्हाट आई हियर, बसारत की, व्हाट आई सी, एंड देन इट टॉक्स अबाउट द हार्ट. ये जो दो हैं, मेरा देखना और मेरा सुनना, ये वो टूल है जिससे आई एम गोइंग टू रिसीव इंफॉर्मेशन एंड देन इट्स गोइंग टू अफेक्ट माय हार्ट. और इस हार्ट के बारे में अल्लाह के नबी सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम ने क्या फरमाया कि तुम्हारे जिस्म में कैसा लोथरा है कि अगर वो सही होगा सो एवरीथिंग इज गोइंग टू बी फाइन, और अगर वो खराब है तो नथिंग इज गोइंग टू वर्क फॉर यू. So I'm just going to plug you out. All of you should close your eyes and just imagine that on the day of judgment, you are in front of Allah Rabbul Izzat, और अल्लाह के सामने जो मेरी accountability है उसके लिए मुझे क्या चाहिए. And first thing that you would realize is कि accountability on the day of judgment is individual. There is no group accountability कि हम सब कहाँ जाएंगे, कैसे जाएंगे. On the day of judgment मैं हूँ और मेरा रब है. That's it. और अल्लाह रब्बुल इज़्ज़त जब मुझसे सवाल कर रहे हैं, that is just about my life. And hence what I have to work on is कि मुझे खुद अपने आप को कैसे करना है. उसके अलावा there is nothing that matters. On that day of judgment, अगर मैं कामयाब हूं तो उसके बाद there is just bliss. और अगर मैं नाकाम हूं तो it doesn't matter. बाकी सब कहाँ है, क्या कर रहे हैं, what is it that their condition is, nothing counts on the day of judgment. तो जब तक मैं आज इसी वक्त अपनी जिंदगी को इसी कॉन्फ्रेंस हॉल से इस पर्सपेक्टिव से डेवलप नहीं करूंगा कि इट्स माय लाइफ. आई नो इसका एक और चॉइस स्ट्रक्चर भी है, मेरी मर्जी. दैट इज समथिंग दैट इज नॉट गोइंग टू काउंट ऑन द डे ऑफ जजमेंट. मेरी सोच क्या है, मेरी फिक्र क्या है, मेरी मर्जी क्या है, दैट इज नॉट व्हाट काउंट्स ऑन द डे ऑफ जजमेंट. What is going to count is कि अल्लाह की मर्जी क्या है. और अल्लाह की मर्जी क्या है इसको समझने के लिए, because what noise leads to is confusion. और अल्लाह रब्बुल इज़्ज़त क्लैरिटी कैसे देते हैं. So before I come to that, there is a concept that we need to understand, and that is इख्तिलाफ, difference of opinion. Because उस noise से navigate करते हुए you will see a lot of differences, and you will see somebody saying something else, somebody saying different. कुरान ही के अंदर, सुन्ना ही के अंदर you would start to see a lot of options out there. अब सवाल ये है कि अगर ये मेरी जिंदगी का सवाल है which I have to present to Allah Rabbul Izzat, तो मैं इख्तिलाफ को समझूं कैसे. Because one of the problems that youth has is कि वो कहते हैं navigating noise के पीछे एक सवाल होता है, सही कौन है और गलत कौन है. And in this talk I'm not going to take any names, no institution, no personalities, because nothing matters. I'm going to do the first exercise that I'm going to take you back to Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam and show you the journey that the Sahabah took with Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So they are the one who are receiving the wahi from Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam as the first addressees. So the first thing that I would want to discuss would be, there's an incident in the Seerah. Allah के नबी sallallahu alaihi wasallam जब जंग खंदक खत्म कर लेते हैं तो immediately after that he goes back to the center of Medina and he's going to take off his armor, he's going to get relax, तो Jibreel alayhi salam comes and he orders कि अल्लाह के नबी सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम, in this war, the Banu Qurayza, that the last qabila of the Jews that was left within the Medina city, they had betrayed. And it's time that you go to them for the war. And Jibreel alayhi salam is still armored and he says, okay, the angels haven't taken their armor off. So immediately, without delay, और आपने ये याद रखना है, वो सीरा जिसका सलाम जिक्र कर रहा था, उसको पढ़ोगे तो you would remember कि वो एक महीने का बड़ा मुश्किल टाइम गुजरा था. The Sahabah are literally crippled to the last, look at the strength of theirs. But फौरन हुक्म मिला, you have to walk towards Banu Qurayza. तो अल्लाह के नबी सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम क्या फरमाते हैं? He says कि you have to move immediately. And एक लफ्ज बोला कि you should go there and none of you should pray, sir, except at the territory of Banu Qurayza. अब यहाँ पे सारे सहाबा ने नबी को डायरेक्ट सुना है, and they've heard very clearly the instructions is you have to walk out immediately and you have to get to Banu Qurayza and you're not going to pray asr before that. अब सहाबा चल रहे हैं, and we know when you're moving as a group तो वहाँ पे delays आ जाते हैं. So on their way the sahaba realize that they will not be able to get to Banu Qurayza in time for the asr prayer. तो वहाँ पे उनके अंदर इख्तलाफ होता है. Remember I said understanding इख्तलाफ एक लाइव सिचुएशन है. अल्लाह के नबी सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम की डायरेक्ट इंस्ट्रक्शंस is what the Sahaba have listened to, but yet there is difference. So one group takes a literal route, and that is they say कि अल्लाह के नबी ने फरमाया था none of you should pray except for at Banu Qurayza. That's it. We're going to take that route. हम Banu Qurayza जाके ही पढ़ेंगे चाहे असर कज़ा हो जाए. The other group, they say, now contextual interpretation. The reason that Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said that was that there is urgency there. कि फौरन निकल जाओ और पहुंचो. The reason that he said that wasn't कि असर literally वहां जाके पढ़ो, क्योंकि कुरान ने क्या कहा है कि इन्ने कानत अलल मुमिनीना किताबुम मौक़ूता, मुकर्ररा वक्त पर नमाज फर्ज की गई है. So we have to pray right now. अब एक ग्रुप ने वही पढ़ी, one group goes back to Banu Qurayza और वहां पे असर की नमाज डिले के साथ पढ़ी. The question is who's right and who's wrong. So the case was presented to Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam when he gets there, और अल्लाह के नबी Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam ने दोनों को approve कर दिया. Why? Because what matters was कि individually they were seeking out कि अल्लाह को राजी कैसे करना है, and one interpretation was different from the other. It was not about right and wrong. It was not about कि कौन इसकी वजह से जन्नत में जाएगा और कौन इसकी वजह से जहन्नुम में जाएगा. It was their individual effort that was accepted by Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. The second instance from the seerah that I would want to present, and I'm taking practical examples जानबूझ के, ताकि that is what we have to understand कि मेरी जिंदगी में अमलन क्या situation है. So we know कि for the namaz you have to do wudu, और अगर आप wudu ना कर पाओ तो then you can go for tayammum, और tayammum is a substitute for the wudu in terms of getting tahara. तो अल्लाह के नबी सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम के दो सहाबा हैं, they're traveling on a journey, और उसमें रास्ते में नमाज का वक्त आता है, so they can't find water. तो वो तयम्मुम करते हैं and then they pray. And before the time for the prayer has ended, they are able to get water. And then there's a difference of opinion amongst those two. One says that I've already prayed, and at the time I was praying, तो हालत ये थी कि I did not have access to water, so my prayer counts. And the other Sahabi, he said that no, because taharat is a condition for a prayer, and वो wuzu से हासिल होती है, so he does the wuzu again, and then he repeats the namaz. And the case comes to Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. When it's presented to Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, so he says to the Sahabi who has prayed, who did not repeat the prayer, that you've done according to the Sunnah. Like once your obligation was done, at the time the circumstances the usko samne rakhte hue, then that's it. And then he beautifully says to the other Sahabi, like he says the first is done according to the Sunnah, but with the second Sahabi he says you're going to get 2 ajr. One for the namaz that you already prayed, and 1 ajr for the one that you repeated. Subhanallah. So Allah Sallallahu practically usko kaise deal kar rahe the, that is a lesson that we have to learn. Because in our case, when we have differences, we don't have the luxury to go back to Nabi Sallallahu and ask him out physically. But we can learn one thing from here, and that is what I call mizaj nabuwat. जो अरसलान आपको असातिज़ा की डीलिंग के एतबार से कह रहा था कि अल्लाह के नबी सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम ने भी सिखाया, बट मोहब्बत से चेहरा बदल के. What we have to learn from here is कि मेरे नबी का मिजाज क्या था. वो मिजाज वो डराने वाला नहीं था. That is something जो हम अगर उस मिजाज के मुताबिक फैसला करना शुरू करेंगे, so then things are going to become easier. So when you take this इख्तिलाफ और उसकी understanding, तो हिस्टोरिकली क्या होता है? सो अहले सुन्नत वल जमात के अंदर ऑल ऑफ यू वुड हैव लिसन्ड टू द टर्म्स लाइक हनफी, शाफी, मालिकी, हम्बली. दिस इज नॉट द टाइम, नॉट डू आई हैव द लग्जरी कि ये स्कूल्स कहां से आ गए थे और इसकी क्या अंडरस्टैंडिंग थी. यू कुड से दैट दिस इज द सॉलिडिफिकेशन ऑफ दैट इनिशियल इख्तिलाफ जो कुरान और सुन्नत, यानी कि वो जो अल्फाज हम तक पहुंचे थे, उस अल्फाज से जो हकीकत का सफर है उस तक पहुंचने के लिए, दैट इज व्हाट यू कॉल द स्कॉलरली ट्रेडिशन. लेकिन वो ट्रेडिशन हमें तंग क्यों करती है? बिकॉज हमारी अंडरस्टैंडिंग वो फ्लॉड है, एंड देन देयर इज सम हिस्टोरिकल एक्सपीरियंस दैट आई रेफर टू. सो आई वुड से मिजाज नबूवत को सामने रखते हुए व्हाट वी हैव टू लुक एट इट कि there can be multiple valid ways of practicing and they will be sourced in Quran and Sunnah in terms of, let's say, नमाज कैसे पढ़नी है, तो हमने उसकी एग्जांपल देख ली. और instead of arguing over differences, we should recognize sincerity and effort in seeking Allah's guidance. अल्लाह के नबी सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम ने निगेट क्यों नहीं किया था? उसने नमाज रिपीट भी की थी, वो अल्लाह को राजी करने के लिए कर रहा था. अनफॉर्चुनेटली आज हमारा एक्सपीरियंस क्या है कि हम में से कोई भी अल्लाह को राजी करने की कोशिश कर रहा है या नहीं कर रहा. दैट्स अ क्वेश्चन वी नॉट आस्किंग आवरसेल्व्स. सो उन डिफरेंसेस की बुनियाद पे अगर अल्लाह के नबी ने डिवीजन कॉज नहीं की, सो व्हाई शुड वी? वी शुड एक्सेप्ट द फ्लेक्सिबिलिटी दैट इज विद इन द दीन. वी शुड एक्सेप्ट द डिफरेंसेस दैट वी सी कमिंग फ्रॉम विद इन द दीन, एंड देयर इज नो अदर वे दैट वी हैव. सो इफ यू लुक बैक जियोग्राफिकली, सो हिस्टोरिकली क्या था कि there were differences from the first generation right now to this, that 2025, but wo felt like this age? No, because if you look at the world map, to usme, and I'm again, don't argue me over because बहुत roughly मैंने areas demarcate किए हैं. So north of Africa was Maliki. वहां पे आमतौर पे मालिकी फिक, इमाम मालिक रहमतुल्लाह अलैह की फिक फॉलो की जाती थी. आपका टर्की, सेंट्रल एशिया, डाउन टू सब कॉन्टिनेंट, आमतौर पे वो सारा हनफी फिक फॉलो करता था. एंड देन यू वुड हैव मिडिल ईस्ट में a difference between Hanbali and Shafi'i fiqh. So there are areas जहाँ पे Hanbali fiqh follow की जा रही है, and there are areas जहाँ पे Shafi'i fiqh follow की जा रही है. But lived reality कैसे different थी from what we experience right now? कि at an individual level, if for example I'm living in Lahore, तो आज से जो 500 साल पहले लाहौरी था, he did not have access to all that diversity. वो जिन उलमा के साथ जाके एक्सपीरियंस कर रहा था अपनी जिंदगी, that was either Hanafi or Shafi or Maliki or Hanbali. And for him, yeah, for each and every individual mapped across the world, उसका lived experience was not diversity. तो उसको ऐसे लगता था कि बहुत clear है. This is one universal sharia जिसको हमारा access है, and that is what we're trying to follow. But then two things happen. The first starts the process and the second leads to the chaos जिसकी हम बात करेंगे, and then we'll talk about उस chaos को settle कैसे करना है. The first thing that happens is, which never happened in history, that's migration. इससे पहले कभी ऐसा नहीं हुआ था कि for example there are about 10 million Pakistanis who are living outside. So Africans वो Middle East में जा रहे हैं, Middle East Europe में जा रहे हैं. So you start to see a lot of migrations across the globe. And उससे क्या हो रहा है? Every one of us would have, हमारी previous generation ने ये पहली दफा experience किया होगा जिन्होंने 70s, 80s, 90s में they saw their relatives going to the Middle East, कि वो वहां से वापस आते थे and then they would do what? वो रफ़ा यदैन करते थे. Why? Because उन्होंने जब 10 साल दुबई में जिंदगी गुजारी है, 10 साल वो सऊदी अरब में गुजारी है, तो then they would start to do रफ़ा यदैन, and then when they come back, तो भाई ये फर्क कहाँ से आ गया? And क्योंकि पहली दफा exposure था तो पता नहीं है. So lived reality change कैसे होना शुरू हुई थी? That through interactions, migration की वजह से you are exposed to realities that were not your own, and then even those could have been handled because वो वहाँ पे चले गए हैं, so they would start to change their practice. वो शाफी हो गए हैं या मालिकी हो गए हैं, and historically the view was it doesn't matter. आप किसी भी trusted scholarship को follow करो, it's fine. But then something unique happens. I hope you recognize the symbols. With the advent of technology, the geography becomes irrelevant. So when sitting down in Pakistan, I have access to information which is global. And then with the social media and internet revolution, what happens is everybody has access to everything. And practically speaking, human mind cannot comprehend this complexity. Even our marketing study में देखो ना, we always want anchors. If you go to a, let's say, superstore, वहाँ पे पूरी shelves की भरी हुई हैं of products. So let's say you need to select a shampoo. So there's no way human mind can comprehend that information कि वो सारे shampoos की list को गौर से पढ़े, and then he goes through that कि what's right, what's wrong, what's best for me, what's the value for money. He's always going to look at anchors. So for example, when you enter and you saw the biggest advertisement right in the front, so you will buy that. या इसी तरह वो कहते हैं what's at your eye contact के level पे, the chance it's going to sell is more as compared to वो जो नीचे पड़ी है, even if that's the best product. That's human reality. So the chaos that we were exposed to, and this is like literally last 2 decades of our history, that because of technology and because of social media, we've been exposed to a reality that we do not have, you could say, the tools to counter. How do we actually live through this chaos? जहाँ पे we need to make sense of कि Allah रब्बुल इज़्ज़त को राजी कैसे करना है. So the first hint, इस सारे chaos में, as I speak, you would have realized, और जैसे आप लोग सोच रहे हो, अल्लाह पिक्चर में है ही नहीं. And Nabi ﷺ is not there in the picture. I'm trying to handle a chaos without putting in a destination. For example, all of you would have used Google Map. So Google Map में use करने के लिए you need to put a destination. And then once you can start the map has one other ingredient that's required. And that is where you are. मैं कौन हूँ? मैं कहाँ पे खड़ा हूँ? So for example, all of you came to Expo Center, but from across Lahore. Every single person, when they put in their destination is same. Lekin the path that was given to them is uniquely dependent on where they're traveling from. So जो बहरिया टाउन से आया है और जो DHS से आया है, they not come on the same path, but they have reached the same destination. So the first focal point that we have to focus on is Allah रब्बुल इज़्ज़त. हमारी गुफ्तगू में अल्लाह के अलावा सब है. इख्तिलाफ की बात है, chaos की बात है, but we're not even in search of the divine reality. वो रहमान कहाँ गया? वो हादी कहाँ गया? और उसने वो जिस कुरान में वो मैसेज दिया है उसके साथ इतना सुपरफिशियल ताल्लुक, अल्लाह के नबी सल्लल्लाहु की सीरा के साथ such a superficial ताल्लुक, तो we're not even read through it, let alone understood. So that is the first thing that we have to think about. So the challenges of information overload. अब मैं ये नहीं कह सकता कि अपने फोन तोड़ दो, इंटरनेट बंद कर दो, सोशल मीडिया डिलीट कर दो. That's not going to happen. But you need to understand the problem. मर्ज के इलाज से पहले उसकी तशखीस होना बहुत जरूरी है. The problems of social media, the first, then thousands of voices. How do you know what's actually true? और फिर किसको सुनो, किसको ट्रस्ट करूं? What do I do? So before I answer these questions, I'll put in front of you a few problems the way the technology works. It's not the fault of the technology, it's the outcome that's problematic. कि इंटरनेट का इशू नहीं है, सोशल मीडिया का इशू नहीं है, but the way it's been designed, उसका आउटकम उसके अलावा कोई और आ नहीं सकता था. एंड इसकी डिजाइन के पीछे हिदायत नहीं थी, इसकी डिजाइन के पीछे मकसद आप लोगों को कुरान और सुन्नह का एक्सेस देना नहीं था. यू आर द कस्टमर, योर अटेंशन वाज बिहाइंड द डिजाइन कि हाउ कैन दे हुक यू ऑन टू दैट एक्सपीरियंस कि आप में से कोई भी बाहर जाए ना. एंड ऑल ऑफ अस नो व्हाट दैट मींस. My using of Instagram, घंटों गुजर जाते हैं पता ही नहीं लगता. My using of YouTube, my using of all other social media platforms. So what that does is, the first problem is it creates echo chambers. For example, what you see on your feed is not dependent on what's right and what's wrong. Not dependent on what you need. It's just purely dependent on the random choices that you made. So for example, अगर आपने randomly एक pro-Palestinian video देखी, so your feed will start to, वो algorithm पीछे काम कैसे करेगा? It will start to give you more content on the same lines. So what you're being fed is dependent on a random choice that you made than what you're consuming. What you're speaking, what's happening in your choices, all of that starts to reflect in your social media feed. What that does is, for example, अगर मैं pro-Palestinian हूँ, my entire Instagram, YouTube, everything is full of the pro-Palestinian content. And the person right next to me is not the one who make the same choices. उसको शायद total cricket नजर आ रहा है. That's it. और उसके साथ जो बंदा है, शायद उसने गलती से कोई Zionist वीडियो देख ली थी, उसको सारा content वो नजर आ रहा है. Why is that important to understand? Because when we say कि यार, I'm so clear about this, I'm so sure about this, ये ऐसे ही है. Why doesn't it make sense to you? Because uska media usko wo nahi dikha raha. And hence, his understanding of reality is going to be completely different from my understanding of reality. That's what echo chamber is. आप पहाड़ पे जाके बोलते हो ना तो आप ही की आवाज echo हो रही होती है. So जो मेरा mindset develop हो रहा है, that's purely dependent on the choices that I made. ठीक है? And then it keeps on building, reinforcing. So far that मुझे लगता है कि जो reality मुझे पता है वही है. And I'm not even ready to listen to the other side. Go back to the understanding of इख्तिलाफ जो मैंने शुरू में बताई है. There is a possibility that there is a reality which is other than that of mine. Second problem with the social media, promotes sensationalism over truth. A tongue twister practicing this. किस किस्म का content viral होगा? Because we have to make sure कि noise अलग हो and core उसमें से निकालनी है. So for example, controversies. वो कहते हैं खबर ये नहीं है कि कुत्ता इंसान को काटे, खबर ये है कि इंसान कुत्ते को काट ले. So if you really look at what's going to go viral has got nothing to do with truth or falsehood, has got nothing to do with what's pleasing to Allah Rabbul Izzat. What's going to happen is the entire virality is going to be dependent on, for example, what is more emotionally charged material. For example, when they say कि you're trying to prove कि फलाना गलत है, फलाना सही है. You're trying to show controversies. So that is going to be more viral as compared to the real content. Real content बेचारा इतना slow and boring होता है कि कौन 3 घंटे की podcast सुने, कौन formal structured programs के अंदर जाए. So you're just swiping through the reality and then you're giving yourself तसल्ली. हाँ मैंने कुरान नहीं पढ़ा, I've not gone through the I don't even know what hadith is, but कोशिश तो कर रहा हूँ. But that कोशिश is not going to lead you to the real outcome. The third problem is then it promotes superficial knowledge. Every single thing requires a context. Every single thing requires the background. Allah के नबी सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम एक सहाबी को फर्क मशवरा देते हैं दूसरे सहाबी से, just like a doctor would do. A doctor is looking at the physical body symptoms and advising, so he will give different kind of medicine to each person based on what the problem is, who the person is. But promotes superficial knowledge, so कहते हैं 30 seconds में respond कर दें. And sometimes, for example, I would receive questions because they've been trained by the social media कि सर आप प्लीज जल्दी से बता दें कि सूद क्यों हराम है. And I'm like, अच्छा, how do I do that? And then sometimes they want me to respond to a situation where I don't even know the context. तो superficial knowledge, 3 सेकेंड 2 मिनट बस उस क्लिप के अंदर अंदर if you're able to grab the attention. So हम जब ऑनलाइन जा रहे थे, that is one of the इख्तिलाफ जो हमेशा नसीहा पे रहता है कि are we online social media institute or not, and we always prefer कि भाई नहीं live setting is always better, and I'm saying that's the only way it's supposed to happen, but that's the way we've been trained. So अब इसके अंदर क्या करो? So यहाँ पे लिखा हुआ है filtering guidance, who should I listen to? और मैंने शुरू में कहा था कि I'm not going to name anybody. किसको सुनना है, किसको नहीं सुनना है, that is not the way I'm going to deal with this problem. What I can possibly do is, so I will show you red flags of unreliable online content. क्या content सही है, क्या content गलत है? It's just like if you want to decide what kind of food intake should I have, तो मैं कहूँगा भाई ये junk food है, ये healthy food है. Make your choices. So we can separate out the junk from the healthy food. So the healthy content is one my soul needs. Healthy content is the one which is going to connect me to Allah Rabbul Izzat. It's going to prepare me for that individual accountability on the day of judgment. जब मैं होऊंगा और रब होऊंगा, and that's it. So it's useless to name people. Why? Because there is no person on planet Earth जो सब सही कहे, and there is no person on planet Earth जो सब गलत कहे. Everyone is doing a mixture of सही and गलत. So what we have to realize is कि मैंने किस किस्म का कंटेंट कंज्यूम करना है, which is going to be more beneficial for me, which is going to help me guide myself towards that ultimate goal कि मैं अल्लाह को राजी करना चाहता हूँ. So the first red flag would be that focuses more on attacking others than teaching deen. And I'm not saying कि वो attack सही है या गलत है, मैं कह रहा हूँ that's irrelevant. तरकुहु मा ला यानी. अल्लाह के नबी साहब क्या फरमा रहे हैं कि मुमिन के ईमान की खूबसूरती है कि वो बेफायदा चीजों को छोड़ देता है. So if that attack is right or wrong is irrelevant, because it's his attack on somebody that's not going to count on my day of judgment. That's not going to help me in my grave. So avoid all that content that is just built up on attacking others. You don't have time for that. Please do something useful in your life than listening to all that. Second red flag, reaction videos and controversies over real Islamic learning. भाई If it's Quran, so spend those 30 minutes reading Surah Fatiha, which is the crux of Quran, then listening to hours and hours of content where somebody said something and what that means is being translated by somebody else and then he's saying whether it's right or wrong. I'm not interested and you shouldn't be. उससे अच्छा again ये नहीं कभी कोई चीज ऐसी कानों में आएगी नहीं. You might end up listening to such stuff, but if that's the only choices, and every one of us just have to go back home, look at our own history. What kind of content do we see in our own history? That's a signal for us. Similarly, the claim that there is only one group that has the right Islam. If there's somebody who's saying, but it's my way or highway, I would say avoid that because there is flexibility in deen. There can be multiple scholarship perspectives that can be developed out of the same Quran and Sunnah. It's a highway with multiple lanes. It's not like it's my lane and that's it. I would recommend, again, it's my recommendation. You would have to see, and I will come to that, कि वो beneficially आप कैसे देख सकते हो. The last thing is, I would say avoid people who have a very harsh, arrogant, and divisive kind of tone. जिसके सुनने के बाद, rather than feeling connected to Allah Rabbul Izzat, you really don't have that feeling. And it's just like there is a chaos in your mind in terms of, your foggy perception in your mind in terms of, कि मैंने क्या करना है. What I have to do is based on what my learning translated into the action that is going to benefit me on the day of judgment. So, the solution, I would say, follow scholars you trust. And the question is, how do I know who to trust? Just one way, relationship. Just like you develop a relationship with a doctor. Maqsad kya tha? Ilaj. There might be doctors out there जो सही नहीं है. There might be doctors out there जो गलत चीजें recommend करते हैं. There might be doctors out there जो qualified हैं. So I have to develop that relationship on the basis of my experience with scholars. और उसमें see what यानी कि recognize Islamic education they've gone through. क्या इल्म हासिल किया है? What's their journey? Because their journey is something that's going to help me on my journey as well. Because they are humans and I'm a human. So if they are on a progress path, then I could be on that path as well. Second, उनका अपना किरदार कैसा है? Whatever they're preaching, how much do they practice on it? If you see somebody who's not practicing their own claims to the deen, I would say avoid. क्योंकि फिर उससे फायदा नहीं होगा, दिल पे असर नहीं होगा. The third thing that you should look at is उसका view balanced होना चाहिए. If you see diversity within the way Allah के नबी ﷺ dealt with the Sahabah, then you need to have that balance. Extreme point of views are always going to be problematic because they're always divisive in nature. हमें वो divisions नहीं चाहिए, इस उम्मत को इत्तेहाद चाहिए. And somebody else's journey is going to be different than mine because they are a different person. Second, I would say one of the problems with social media is that we become passive consumers of information. We're just listening to hours and hours, and I'm not even saying even if it's productive, hours and hours of content with zero effect on our practical life. So when you consume, you have to stop yourself and you have to reflect on that. How is it that Allah Rabbul Izzat, the knowledge that I just got, is going to help me become a better person? So उसके लिए उस consumption से social media के you have to translate into learning Quran and Hadith properly. It might be a very slow process, but that's the only path that's going to help you actually know Allah Rabbul Izzat better. And for that, I would recommend attend structured courses. They got technology, online, giving you access to some scholars sitting in New York, somebody sitting in Australia, somebody sitting in Saudi. That has a positive side to it as well. But it's a choice that you have to make. Okay, rather than going through content on Instagram Reels and TikToks, join some structured program. It's going to be way more beneficial as compared to any program जो कि 2 मिनट 3 मिनट की reels के अंदर translate हो रहा है. ऐसा कोई program हो ही नहीं सकता. So that is also going to help you in this engagement and reflection process. Because अगर मैं reflect नहीं कर रहा, I will never be able to translate that into something which is productive in my life. Third thing is focus on your own spiritual growth. The reason that you want to learn that ilm, the reason that you want to understand Quran, the reason that you want to understand the Seerah is how do I become a better human? मैं बेहतर इंसान कैसे बनूंगा? और अगर बेहतर इंसान नहीं बन रहा, तो उस सारे इल्म का, उस सारी information का कोई फायदा नहीं है. The third thing, in your engagement with media, please stop forwarding everything without verifying it. Allah ke Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that it's enough for a person to be declared as what? Kadhib, because he forwards whatever he's receiving. जो मिला बगैर वेरीफाई किया कि ये आगे से फैला दिया. So वो जो viral content है, वो that virality, I'm one of the instigators of that because I also keep on forwarding people. You reflect and engage with content and only share to those who will benefit the content that will benefit. That's it. Do not need to like everything that you see. Do not need to forward everything that you see because it's not going to help. And whatever you're forwarding, please make sure that you verify. Okay, it's from a reliable source, from the scholars that you trust. Only then forward it. And see, okay, how is it going to be benefiting the taqwa of the people that you're sending it to? Or is it just controversies that you're forwarding? For example, X scholar did something, that creates a scandal, and then you verify it, and then you forward that scandal to others. How's that going to help? So please make sure that your engagement with social media is productive. And it's only going to be productive when it's reflected in your life as a continuous improvement. So that will, inshallah, benefit you. So now, the last part of my talk. There are 3 possible mindsets that you could have. And I'm still saying, no matter how simple I try to make it and how clear I try to make it, when you're going to use technology to get all that information in front of you, you might get confused. And even if you narrow it down to the productive choices I have said, so based on the understanding of ikhtilaf, you will still see that there are differences of opinions amongst valid scholarship as well. So how do you deal with those differences? How do you feel कि वो differences मेरे अमल को कहाँ affect करेंगे? So there are 3 possible mindsets that you could have. The first is the excuse maker. This is a non-practicing Muslim जो उस इख्तिलाफ की बुनियाद पर क्या कहता है कि everything is so easy, I don't know what's right and what's wrong, और फिर वो अपनी मर्जी करता है. That's it. And by the way, ये थोड़े नहीं है. For example, namaz सबको पता है फर्ज है. This excuse maker is not going to pray. वो कहते हैं ये सारा दिन उलमा लड़ते रहते हैं. So I don't know what's right and what's wrong. And that's it. And then they're living with their own life. इसका end result क्या है? जिसको अल्लाह रब्बुल इज़्ज़त कुरान में क्या फरमाया था? अफ़रअयता मन इत्तख़ज़ इलाहहु हवा. Haven't you seen that person who's made his own desires his ilah? वो जो ला इलाहा इल्लल्लाह था, ये इसकी translation क्या होगी? He's just going to जो दिल चाहता है. That's it. Then there is a person, and majority of us are somewhere there. And then we translate to what the real game is. The loophole seeker. ये वो हम जैसा believer है जो कोशिश कर रहा होता है कि I want to now be on the path that is pleasing to Allah Rabbul Izzat, but अपने नफ्स की वजह से, probably because of peer pressure, because of his halat, he wants the easy way out, not the pleasing way out. Not what Allah Ta'ala wants from me, but how much can I get away with? So then he's going to use that ikhtilaf, कि देखा ना fatwa मिल गया ना? Oh, that scholar somewhere on planet Earth, he's giving me that loophole so I can exploit that. The question that he's not asking himself is, okay, what is it that is going to be presentable on the day of judgment when it's me and Allah Rabbul Izzat and that's it? Ask yourself, will your response to the question change if this is the last act that you will do and somehow miraculously you know that Allah is going to take you away? If that's the answer, then this is an attitude that we don't want. This is not the mindset that we want कि हम उस इख्तिलाफ को इस्तेमाल ऐसे करें कि wherever a loophole that allows my nafs to get more, which allows me more ease than is required, so मैं उसको इख्तिलाफ को उस तरह use कर रहा हूँ. Last possibility, which is could be a sincere seeker. The question that he always asks himself is, what if I ask this question to Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam? What would be the response? And for that you need to go through the seerah. You need to read the Quran to develop that mizaj. उस वो मिजाज अल्लाह के नबी की सीरत पढ़े बगैर develop हो नहीं सकता. But that's the real question, because that's the only question that's going to count on the day of judgment. And इसके लिए, for example, sometimes you would have to force yourself. कभी कब्रिस्तान जाओ और जाके कब्रिस्तान देखो उन कब्रों पे. कभी अपने किसी रिश्तेदार को सिर्फ नमाज जनाजा पढ़ा के ना आ जाओ, उसको कब्र में उतारो. And sometimes you need to see it and feel it and imagine yourself into that situation to get the real answer. वो जो सारा फॉग है, जो सारा हेज है, वो एक सेकंड में खत्म होगा. But that only requires one thing, and that is you are a sincere seeker. The four Sahabah, शुरू में जो मैंने present किए थे, the groups, one thing that you could all agree on is कि none of them were trying to find the ease out of it. मैं ये नहीं कह रहा कि कभी दीन का हुक्म आसान नहीं होगा, बिल्कुल आसान भी हो सकता है, पर उनका एम ये नहीं था कि I'll pick easy one out. If easy one out is the more pleasing to Allah Rabbul Izzat, pick that. क्योंकि अल्लाह के नबी सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम के मिजाज में ये बात आती है कि out of two halal choices he will pick up the easy one out. अल्लाह के नबी सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम नमाज पढ़ रहे हैं, हमसे ज्यादा कोई कनेक्टेड, अल्लाह के नबी सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम से ज्यादा कनेक्टेड कोई हो नहीं सकता. But he himself says कि मैं बच्चे के रोने की वजह से नमाज मुख्तसर कर देता था. तो वो मिजाज समझना पड़ेगा in order to really get to that point कि मैं sincere seeker हूं कि नहीं हूं. इस sincerity को seek out करने के लिए this is a framework that I would present. So framework is trying to get that which is more pleasing to Allah and not what I can get away with. और इस framework को समझने के लिए there is a hadith of Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What the hadith says is al-halal bayyin wal-haram bayyin wa ma baynahuma al-mushtabihat la ya'lamuha kathirun min an-nas. Halal clear है, haram clear है, और उसके जो बीच में है that's the gray zone, and hence I call it the green, gray and red zone. और अक्सर इंसानियत ग्रे एरिया को नहीं जाती. अच्छा, हदीस आगे कंटिन्यू कैसे करती है कि the one who avoids the gray area will be able to safeguard his honor and his deen, and whoever chooses to live a life in that gray area is bound to fall into haram. But I will use this to show you a framework कि why would that itself lead to differences. So there will be some scholars, और ये मिजाज पे डिपेंड करता है कि वो उसको कैसे लेते हैं, they will read this hadith as this: al-halal bayyin, halal बहुत clear है, avoid everything else, and they will come up with a stricter understanding of the path that you should take. इसका बिल्कुल एक flip भी हो सकता है, and that is al-haram bayyin. There is a mizaj which is going to read the same hadith, and they're going to come to the conclusion कि haram is clear and everything that's not haram is permissible. So they will give you more leverage. And now you would be asking yourself, कि please tell us कि ये वाला सही है. हाँ, हराम हो bayyin, जो हराम है ना वो बहुत clear है. हाँ, 4 चीजें हराम है and then that's it. But इन दोनों में कौन सही है, कौन गलत है? Let me open it up for you. Halal or bayyin is going to be a stricter understanding, because then you would have very narrow choices to pick up from. ये अगर अपनी जात के लिए कर रहे हो, well done. आप वो एहतियात करो जो आपको अबू ज़र गफ़ारी रज़ियल्लाहु अन्हु बना दे. You're going to be straight into Jannat. But if you use this attitude, halal or bayyin, to evaluate and judge others, now there's a problem. Because you might see somebody in a gray zone, you don't know the context, you don't know the person, but you will evaluate them as haram or bayyin. Uski gray zone में भी your conclusion is going to be that this person is on haram. And not only that is going to destroy your dunya, that's going to destroy your akhirah. Because your opinion is not an opinion of husn zan. Your opinion is not of a compassion and empathy, where you put yourself into somebody else's shoes and you come to a conclusion. But on the flip side, wal haram wa bayyin, a person who has this approach, when he's going to look at everybody else, he's going to give them the relaxation and husn zan, because he would say that they're not doing haram. They are in a zone that is still permissible. It's gray, but they're not doing haram. They're not sinners. Having that approach really helps when that approach is for others. But having that approach for yourself, then go back to the hadith. The hadith says, if you keep on giving yourself relaxations, if you start to use this approach for your personal benefit in terms of what you see in dunya, and you make choices accordingly, then that's dangerous, because hadith says you're bound to fall into haram, you lose your deen and you lose your honor. So in keeping in mind both the approaches, I would say be strict on yourself, but be compassionate and empathetic towards others. अपने पे क्यों सख्ती करनी है? क्योंकि it's my qabr. I don't want to take risks. इसका ये मतलब नहीं है कि जिंदगी में कभी ग्रे जोन में नहीं जाओगे. So the last thing that I would want to show you people, do not take life as an instance, as an event that happened and then that's going to determine your jannat or jahannam. Life is a journey. كن في الدنيا كأنك غريب. You should live in this life as a stranger. और वो stranger कौन सा है? जिसकी destination दुनिया है ही नहीं है. All of us have to ask ourselves, where do I see myself eventually on the day of judgment? And when you're looking at the life as a journey, then I'm the driver. And there's a green zone, halal ubayyan, and there's a red zone, haram ubayyan, but then there is in between the gray zone. I have to try to live a life that is closer to the green zone. And isiliye, if you reflect back on the entire talk, the kind of content that I consume, who should I listen to? How do I know who I trust? How do I know who's the right scholar for me? Who's the right doctor for me? Who's the one who's working on my spirituality that helps me stay on the green zone? So green zone is going to have very clear answers. Namaz, roza, zakat, nikah. And the red zone is going to have very clear answers as well. Alcohol, riba, zina, jhoot. All of that's something we have to avoid. But the real message I would say is, I would put something here, music, Netflix, gender mixing. There was a debate between me and Salahuddin कि मैं music को कहाँ show करूँ, gray zone में या red zone में. My own opinion is it's haram. Majority of the scholars think it's haram. But you might find some odd scholar out there जो कहता है कि नहीं haram नहीं है. I'm not here to give you a fatwa, and that's not the mindset I want you to take away. The problem is, just for example, sometimes you're driving your car, आपका steering सीधा है, but उसकी जब alignment out हुई है ना, तो it's going to the left. So how would you know how do I deal with this? So you have to understand, where is your life journey taking you? Where do you find yourself? As I said before, go back today, just look at your own history. अगर आपको अपनी history बार बार YouTube की clear करनी पड़ती है, अगर आपको अपने watched content को बार बार clear up करना पड़ता है, that's the problem. Netflix is a tool. उस Netflix पे क्या देख रहे हो? That is something you have to ask yourself. Social media is a tool. Gender mixing, I don't want to get into the debate, halal hai ke haram hai. It's like, what are you ending up with? What's your outcome in that? Because if that's not the question you're asking yourself, you're asking the wrong questions. Because it's my life. Is life ke chalne pe, do I want to end up pleasing to Allah Rabbul Izzat or not? So I have to keep on reflecting and keep on evaluating myself. तो दोबारा reiterate करो, दोबारा अपने आप की ट्यूनिंग ठीक करो, दोबारा ऐसी सोबत में ऐसे स्कॉलर्स के पास जाओ जहां पे you can get back towards the green zone. That would be the message. And the last ayah which very beautifully put this up is, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu in tattaqullaha yaj'al lakum furqana. अल्लाह फरमाते हैं कि जो भी तुमसे क्या करेगा, अल्लाह का तक़वा इख्तियार करने की कोशिश करेगा. Anybody who's striving to please Allah Rabbul Izzat with the best of his intentions and the best of his actions, Allah Rabbul Izzat gives him furqan. Just like Umar Farooq Razillah anhu, who could differentiate between right and wrong, who could tell between what's falsehood and what's the truth. Allah Rabbul Izzat says, if you try for taqwa, I'm going to give you the furqan, because it's internal. The solution to navigating the chaos is in my heart, जिसके बारे में अल्लाह कुरान में कहते हैं, काश इनके पास वो दिल होता जो अकल करता, काश वो आंखें होती जो देखती, काश वो कान होते जो सुनते. उस फुरकान के साथ जो चलने की कोशिश कर रहा होगा, will he be perfect? No. The ayah completes this beautifully. وَيُكَفِّرْ أَنْكُمْ سَيِّئَاتِكُمْ. Allah Rabbul Izzat is going to clean up your mess, because you're going to be messy. Allah Ta'ala Quran में क्या फरमाते हैं? خُلِقَ الْإِنسَانُ ضَعِيفًا. And इंसान को पैदा ही कमजोर किया है. With that Furqan, does that mean you're going to become the best human on earth with no mistakes? No. You still might end up sometimes in gray zone. You still end up in that red zone. But because your intention was, I want to please Allah Rabbul Izzat, you will calibrate yourself back into the reality. And Allah says, وَيَغْفِرْ لَكُمْ وَاللَّهُ ذُو الْفَضْلِ الْعَظِيمِ. Allah Rabbul Izzat is going to forgive your sins, because you tried to please Him and not please your nafs. You took His pressure and you did not take the pressure of your surroundings. May Allah Rabbul Izzat give you and me the tawfiq to understand the Quran and Sunnah and to relate to the Quran and Sunnah the way Allah Ta'ala wants us. And I would end with a dua, Allahumma arina haqqa haqqa warzuqna ittiba'ah. Ya Allah, show me the right as a right and give me the tawfiq to do ittiba' of it. Wa arina batila batila warzuqna ijtinaba, and show me the batil as batil, and give me the tawfiq to have istinab from it, to stay away from it. May Allah Rabbul Izzat accept me and you on the day of judgment as His trying, sincere seekers, and He grants us Jannah based on that. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.